Jess Phillips, great to see you. We are going to talk a bit about politics, but a lot about you, because this is called The Real Me, and it's supposed to humanise politicians. And I think you have some very human stories to share, actually.
I like to think so.
But first of all, I mean, you're known, if people know you in politics, a leading feminist. Was there a moment or experience that led you to become a fighter for women's rights?
I think working in women's refuges, you come across certain cases, and I worked in women's refuges and with victims of sexual exploitation and grooming for years before becoming a Member of Parliament. And there was one particular case of a young woman, lived in the care system, abused as a kid, then had her children, was put into prostitution as a kid, into adulthood, had her children removed from her, and she was just sort of would spring back into service. And I just thought that every single agency, policy that anyone had ever tried with good intention to make had just failed this kid. And she was, when I say she was a kid, she was probably about the same age as me at the time. But she presented as a sort of teenager. And I remember just thinking, God, we're doing something wrong. Constantly we're doing something wrong. And I've got to try and get into politics to change those systems, basically. She, and I think about her almost daily. She's I don't know what happened to her in the long run. I doubt it was good. But yeah, this sort of constant failure that I watched women and children go through as a worker, I think that almost certainly is the thing that made me decide to step up.
We're going to talk more about politics later in this interview, but I want to talk about you. You have had some very human experiences, common experiences for women. When you were a teenager, you had anorexia. I want to know when that was and what brought that about.
It's almost impossible to say, really. I can't remember. There was no sort of definitive moment. I've got to say, I mean, I was a teenager in the 1990s, and being anorexic was pretty de rigueur. It was when we sort of first knew about it all, and quite a few of my friends were very, very severely ill, hospitalised, institutionalised, with very, very severe anorexia, and I was never at that level. But I think that, originally it started out as I would make myself sick, so I was, but it was never really about being thin.
Really?
Never ever. I was really thin. I was a teenager. And
so you started making yourself sick.
Yeah. And I don't remember when I started to do it. And at first you tell yourself, because you've been out on the lash or something, that you're making yourself, when you've drunk too much and you make yourself sick to make yourself feel better. Yeah. When you've been drunk. So I think I sort of started with, and then it became sort of like my personality. Like my friends would say, she's always vomiting, isn't she? Or she's always sick when she's drunk or something. This was when I was 14,
right.
15. And it just became a thing that I did just to sort of control situations, make myself feel in control. I don't know why particularly I felt out of control. It was the 90s though, and, standards were different to how they are now, and the things would happen to me and my friends that if now they were happening to my teenage kids, I would be appalled by them. Sort of, it was cool for basically 20 and 30-year-old men to come and pick us up in their cars.
Yeah,
that was it wasn't just cool, it was currency. You were the coolest kid. Yeah. If some bloke in a Vauxhall Nova came
if they
to
had
pick
a private number plate, then even bigger deal.
And they'd be playing their music loud, and they pick you up while you were in your school uniform. Yeah. It wasn't just that there was any safeguarding concerns not raised about me. It was totally normal and totally regular that sort of thing would go on without question.
But so, because there's sort of a debate about eating disorders, on the one hand, it's about control.
Mm-hmm.
Other people say that it's because women are subjected to constant images, and so...
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be 6 of one and half a dozen of the other, hasn't it? I don't think that the constant images make every woman react in that way. But if you have incidences of trauma or concern, or you're frightened about your environment, it's never... It's almost impossible for me to talk about it in these terms because I didn't feel like that at the time. I can paste it onto my teenage self. I thought I was the queen of the bloody world at the time. Often when people say, what would you say to your 16-year-old self? I say, take yourself down a peg or two. Like, you're nowhere near as good as you think you are.
When did you... So you started off with bulimia.
Yeah.
So you started being sick, you then decided to starve yourself.
And I never considered... Oh, then actually I went to university and I got, I think a bit like when you become a member of parliament, put on like a stone. When you become a member of parliament, like the tea room stone, because you're not living the life that was your ordinary pattern of life. And so when I went to university, like my parents were really quite strict about like eating healthily. So I just ate pizza all the time and became really quite unhealthy. And I put on weight. And then, the sort of dramatic reaction to that was then that I think that the way that I eat, whether I'm putting on weight or trying to lose it, and I will do that for the rest of my life, and I will live with that fact. I will never get away from that. Both are disordered. It's just disordered eating of some variety or another. But then in the reaction to that, there was about a year where I only ate popcorn that I made myself. And my
This is at university?
This is at university. My calorie intake must have been, literally less than 500 calories a day. I would starve myself. Even as I'm saying this, there was no pathway in my mind that was making me, it was an initial reaction to having put on weight and then wanting to lose it. But yeah, I became so controlled about the things that I ate that when I left university, in the middle of university, I must have weighed about 7 stone, and I'm 5'8". So
then you sort yourself out, like you say. Probably all women have an unhealthy relationship with food.
Yeah. But we say I sort myself out. No, I will have disordered eating for the rest of my life. I emotionally eat. I will drop my weight massively and dramatically. I'm absolutely brilliant at going on a diet. When people say to me, "Oh, how do you stick to it?" and they're sort of jealous of it, I'm like, it's not necessarily a good thing that I can stick to this. This is, I am obsessive. I am all one way or another. And it's like an addiction of any sort. It's like an addiction of any sort that you will overeat to cover your emotion, and you will then undereat to feel in control. I wish I could stop it, but that's life, isn't it? I genuinely just feel like it's not causing me any particular massive grief at the moment. It is just the way that I live. I've got a family. I eat with them most of the time. My husband's an excellent cook. I'm not unhealthy. I've tried to make it be about health rather than anything else. But I'm frankly just kidding myself. I've been groomed all my life to think that women should look a certain way. I wish that I could say that I felt differently and my feminism has helped me feel differently, but I don't.
Okay, really interesting. You spoke in Parliament during the debate about having an abortion and the process involved in that. If it's too personal,
no,
fine.
It's fine.
When was that?
Dates wise, it must have been about 2000. I can only work it out because of the ages of my children. 2006, and I can't stress enough that I can't think of the date because it's not something that sticks in my head particularly.
Interesting. How old were you? Try and do the maths.
In 2006, I would have been about 24. My eldest son I had when I was 23, and he was, I literally can't remember, but he was something like 5 months old at the time.
Goodness me. Right.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's hard. Was it hard, actually?
It was hard having a 5-month-old baby. Yeah, it was incredibly hard being 23 and having a 5-month-old baby, and then finding that I was pregnant immediately afterwards. Honestly, I still don't know actually how it happened. I don't remember my life at all at that time. I was just like living in a daze. But I remember coming downstairs every single time I've been pregnant in my life. The moment I've seen the pregnancy test, I've known instinctively in that moment exactly what I felt about it and what I was going to do. I've had a miscarriage as well as 2 live births. So I know that, actually, and on that occasion, I was not happy to be pregnant. So I've known instantly. And so I knew instantly in that second when I saw the pregnancy test, well, my baby, I could hear my baby crying downstairs that I didn't want to have another baby. And I went downstairs and I said to my boyfriend, now my husband, I said, oh God, I think I'm pregnant. And he was just like, he tried to put on a brave face. He was like, I guess we're going to have another baby. He wasn't keen on the fact that we'd had the first one. I was just like, no. And he was like, oh God, thank God. But no, I didn't, it wasn't stress. The thing that was stressful was waiting.
Yeah.
That was the thing that
appointment.
Yeah, so having to go and justify yourself in the appointment. So I had to go. I'm very pleased to say that it didn't seem to be such a thing back then in 2006 that there was protesting and things outside abortion clinics.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to encounter any of that. I had to go to the doctors, and my doctor said to me in a sort of slightly judgmental way, I mean, more than slightly, completely, I don't sign off for abortions. I don't do it. My GP, we have a doctor in the practice who does that. I'll make you an appointment with her. And I just remember being like, okay, like on moral grounds, I don't do it. And they're completely entitled to do that.
Yeah.
There isn't another health area they're entitled to do that in, incidentally.
Should they be entitled to do that?
Well, look, I think that if you go into the medical profession and you have very, very strong feelings about this, then, I do, as long as there is a provision available, which at my GP surgery there was, I can see that you can work in that environment. But I think if you're going into general practice where this might come up, it is a health issue, not a moral issue. It is a women's health issue. And so I do think that we need to make sure that in every GP practice, and there are very vulnerable groups where that would, that initial no would be damaging. And so we've got to make sure that the patient is the principal, not the doctor's morality. But, there was a doctor, a lovely, lovely doctor at my old GP surgery who then had to sign it off for me. And then I had to go and get another doctor at the clinic to sign it off for me because as a woman, I can't make that choice by myself without 2 people signing it off. I don't know why one doctor isn't good enough to sign off my need for that. So I then had to go and I had to have a scan to date it. And then I had to wait for something like 6 weeks.
Oh gosh.
And I've got a newborn baby and I'm feeling sick and it's for nothing. When you feel sick when you're pregnant, you sort of like, there's a frisson of excitement about the fact that you're going to have a baby, and I felt so sick, and I really resented having to wait.
Jess, can't believe how quickly it's gone. I want to ask you one final question. You stood to be Labour leader at the last leadership election when Keir Starmer was elected. You withdraw early in that contest. Why on earth did you do that?
So angry, Gloria. A few reasons that I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I hated everything about it. It made me feel miserable. From the very second that I agreed to do it, I felt sick and wasn't enjoying it at all. Horrible. And I remember it was Christmas, wasn't it? And just having to go to one thing and have 5 sort of apparatchiks standing around me telling me what to do, and then I was like, oh my God, I've got to get my kids some Christmas presents, and then running around the shops and then going back to something else. I just was like, I hated it. I like going out dancing with my friends. I like being a normal human being. I like living a life, and I hated not being able to do that. The second reason was there was no way that I was going to win. And so why would I put myself through something so grim when Keir Starmer was very clearly sort of on the pathway to success. But one of the reasons that I did it was to open up the Labour Party to people who aren't that interested in politics, which I think I have a particular skill for, and get loads of people to join the Labour Party. So I dropped out at the point where you could no longer join.
Yes or no? Will we ever see Jess Phillips, leader of the Labour Party?
I mean, I'm winding down now. Anyway, I don't go out dancing with my mates as much as anyway. COVID's put the kibosh on basically my desire to go out dancing. But I think it's probably quite unlikely, but I wouldn't say never. I wouldn't say that I would never run again, because I just don't think that's honest, because I might do. But I really, I can't deal with the machine.
Yeah.
I'm not good in a machine.
I totally understand it. And that's why lots of people think you should run for Labour leader. Jess Phillips, you have been a joy. So frank, open, interesting as ever. Thank you, Jess Phillips.
No worries.